Go for it.
Great. Well, hi everyone, I'm Antonela. Thanks for the invitation, and today I'll be talking about the relationship between recommender systems and misinformation. First, a little bit about me. I'm from Tandil, a small city in Argentina. I have a PhD in computer sciences, and I work as assistant researcher at CONICET. That will be like the government's research agency, and as an assistant professor at my university. I have mainly worked on social media with special interest in recommender systems. Now let's start with the definition. Fake news is made up stuff. It's manipulated to look credible and to be easily spread to large audiences who are willing to believe the fictions and spread the word. But this phenomenon is not new. It has always existed. And we can find examples as long as both the Roman and British empires. So when does fake news become misinformation? Well, all depends on the intention. Misinformation refers to false content that is unintentionally or unknowingly disseminated. People believe in what they're sharing and do not check beforehand before sharing it. For example, rumors during an attack, or maybe innocent advices for preventive COVID. On the other hand, disinformation refers to false content that is intentionally disseminated with intent to harm. For example, hoaxes or rumors with legal consequences. And we also have malinformation, in which there is an intention to harm. It usually spans from some real background, which is often exaggerated. And social media aggravates the problem. While time ago news were consumed from a reduced number of traditional news outlets, currently, social media has significantly transformed how the general public consumes information, to such an extent that many contemporary political events in the world have been connected to social media usage. Online social networks are increasingly used to access political information, engage with political elites, and discuss politics. These new communication platforms can benefit democratic processes as they reduce barriers to information, increase citizen engagement, allow individuals to voice their concerns, help debunk false information, and improve accountability and transparency in political decision-making. So for starters, individuals can use social media to access ideologically diverse viewpoints and make better informed decisions. However, in recent years, social media has also fostered the propagation of different forms of misinformation and abusive behaviors. These phenomena have also been associated with an increase in politics, science, and even healthcare polarization. It is a common problem in all media, but it's exacerbated in digital social media due to the speed and ease in which posts are propagated. Social media enables users, bots, and malicious actors to spread information rapidly without confirmation of truth, and to paraphrase this information to fit their intentions or beliefs. And this fake and unreliable content can severely affect society, posing significant threats to democracies and economy. For example, with the COVID-19 pandemic, health misinformation as a threat to public health, ranging from the viralization of harmful treatments to conspiracies. And in turn, this can also affect how people perceive content. Repeated exposure can alter the likelihood of accepting fake content as truth, especially when the fake content aligns with internal belief. And also, as fake content proliferates, the line between what's fake or not becomes more uncertain, inducing users to doubt the nature of all content and the idea that all content is biased, hindering the differentiation between fake and authentic or real content. As an example, several politicians in Argentina were caught sharing misinformation. In this example, we can see our president sharing politics, fake news related to the Bolivian government, and regarding a homemade treatment for COVID-19. And these were said on like the most popular media outlets, so they were really a big thing. So what are we doing about it? Well, now I'll be presenting 3 papers tackling different phenomena tying recommender systems with misinformation. First, I'll be talking about how recommender systems can affect misinformation spreading patterns and how they can boost the influence of misinformation spreaders. Second, as recommender systems can lead to certain interaction patterns like echo chambers and filter bubbles, a question that we could be asking is how to help avoid echo chambers and how to avoid making recommendations that strengthen such phenomena. Finally, we know that there is misinformation and that it gets spread by people or bots, so how can we characterize them? Well, let's start. Recommender systems are central to online information consumption and user decision processes as they help users find relevant information and establish new social relationships. However, recommenders could also unintendedly help propagate misinformation and increase the social influence of the users spreading it, which, as we know, it might have disruptive consequences in our society. And people recommender systems are of special interest as they directly contribute to the evolution of the social network structure, affecting the information and the opinions users are exposed to. In this work, we contributed to the study of how can we assess the effect of link prediction techniques on misinformation propagation and polarization. We wanted to see whether recommenders affect the propagation of misinformation. how do recommenders enable the social influence of spreaders, and whether spreaders have a more central role in networks. And also, we wanted to determine whether a particular recommender type causes a higher propagation than the others. Meaning, do recommenders affect network properties in the same way? Is there any recommender causing a more central distribution of spreaders? So we combine link prediction techniques with an opinion dynamic model to simulate the behavior of individuals changing their opinions as a consequence of their interactions with the neighborhood to assess how recommendations would affect misinformation spreaders' influence. To this end, we define a 4-step pipeline including data collection, network derivations, selection, and evaluation of recommenders, and the simulation of opinions over the recommendation-induced network. First, data collection. Evaluation was based on Fitbit, a COVID-related misinformation dataset collected from Twitter. It included over 700 COVID-related claims and over 100,000 tweets belonging to 24,000 users. All tweets were retrieved using the Faking It tool. Tweets were labeled into fake or authentic based on PolitiFacts and Snopes labels, with 26% of authentic content. These tweet labels were used to determine whether users were misinformation spreaders. Users were deemed as spreaders if the proportion of fake content was higher than a certain threshold. For the purpose of evaluation, we consider a conservative threshold of 0.5. Second, we derive a user network. Instead of focusing on the structural follower and following network, we focus on the conversational network in which nodes represented users and edges that reply, mention, quote, or retweet interactions. Edges are directed to represent the flow of conversations. To ensure that user graph is not disconnected, we kept users and their tweets in the largest connected component that had shared more than one tweet. In the case of replies, there's an edge from user A to user B if the A replied to B. For mentions, there's an edge from A to B if A mentioned B. And for quotes, there's an edge from A to B if A quote B. Then for retweets, there's an edge from A to B if B retweeted A. We follow a temporal partition of data in which the first 70% of interactions were used for the training set and the remaining 30% for the test set. This resulted in a training set with 41% of spreaders, 49% of non-spreaders, and 10% of neutral users. If instead the whole network was considered, the spreader-non-spread distribution changed. As users share more tweets, the tendency of users to share misinformation increased, and only 2% of users reverted the misinformation spreading behavior. As original network topology and homophily can affect the final characteristics of the network and condition the effect of recommenders, we quantify the polarization of users comparing the spreadness score of users with that of the users they interacted with. On average, 27% of spreaders' interactions were with other spreaders, while for non-spreaders, only 16% of interactions were with spreaders. Both groups tended to interact more with non-spreaders showing a higher homophilic behavior. Third, recommendations were made based on several traditional recommenders responding to different underlying principles. While the performance of recommenders is not the main focus of this study, we consider their evaluation important. This does not aim to endorse recommendations, but check whether they would be close to the actual user interactions. If recommendations do not follow, even loosely, then the resulting network structure might not be representative of user behavior. For evaluation, we consider 3 types of metrics. First, precision and NDCG. Second, variations of intra-list dissimilarities, namely diversity, which measures differences between recommended users, and novelty, which measures differences between the recommended and the already known users. Dissimilarities were measured by the Euclidean distance of structural and content-based vectors. Content-based distance was computed based on the word-to-vec representation of user tweets. While for computing structural distances, users were represented by a vector definition their interaction rate with users from the different communities. We also assessed user exposure to misinformation, measuring the ratio of recommended users who were misinformation spreaders. Finally, we simulated opinion diffusion based on the Q-voter model, a generalization of the original voter model. In this simple model, the opinions of any given user change at random times under the influence of the opinion of Q neighbors. Opinions are defined as whether users are misinformation spreaders or not. The parameter Q was selected according to a preliminary simulation over the training user. The process takes as input the training user graph, which is the one used as a base for recommendations, and the recommendations. In each iteration, a random user is selected, and the next recommendation in the ranking is added to the graph. In accordance to the attention budget phenomenon, for each newly added edge, we remove user's eldest neighbor. This allows discarding any effect associated with graph densification. Then, the update rule of the selected model is applied, and opinions are modified accordingly. We assume that users accept all recommendations. Although this assumption might be unrealistic, it allows observing how recommendations could shape the network. Once all recommendations for every user are considered, the simulation continues to let any long-term effect of the final graph emerge. Iterations are stopped once a stable state is reached. To quantify the effect of recommenders on spreader propagation, we compare the characteristics of the induced network obtained at the end of the simulation with the real edge and spreader distribution network. And we consider different metrics. The percentage of users at the end of the simulation that are spreaders, the clustering coefficient, which measures how connected users' neighbors are to each other. The centrality metrics do not only define how nodes are connected, but also how actively they communicate and how they could influence others. We also quantify the polarization of users in terms of the Pearson correlation between users' spreadness state and their neighbors' states. And finally, we consider random walk controversy score, which measures polarization by computing the probability of a random user being exposed to users from the other group. We tackled two research questions. First, how do recommenders contribute to misinformation spreader recommendation? And second, how do recommenders contribute to amplifying the influence of misinformation spreaders? Here we have the recommendation results. We're recommending 10 friends to each user. For each metric, we report the average across all users. Diversity and novelty for the base graph were computed considering the test set as the recommended users. In general, recommenders achieve low precision and moderate NDCG. The highest relevance results were obtained with the topology-based recommenders. Popularity achieved the highest NDCG. Except for the random and content-based recommenders, statistically significant differences were observed between the results obtained for the spreaders and the non-spreader groups. Generally, recommendations of structural diversity and novelty were higher than content-based diversity novelty. Structural diversity novelty indicate that recommended users belong to communities that users had not yet explored. These recommendations could affect network rewiring during simulations as new edges might connect faraway users. We see a trade-off between relevance and diversity novelty metrics. Recommenders achieving high relevance achieve low diversity novelty and vice versa. The fact that recommendations based on the shared content increase content-based diversity novelty could imply that users interact with others sharing semantically different content, which might be related to the observed cross-group interactions. Regarding user exposure to misinformation, recommendations induce less than 40% of misinformation spreaders, while the real last interactions in the base graph include only 18% of spreaders. In general, the ratio of recommended spreaders was higher for spreaders than for non-spreaders, which implies that the spreaders might be inserted in echo chambers that are strengthened as the effect of recommendations. In summary, the best relevance performing recommenders were the ones recommending the fewest spreaders, while recommenders with increasing diversity novelty tended to recommend the highest ratio of spreaders. As regards the second research question, here we can see the simulation results. For comparison purposes, we include the scores obtained with simulating the propagation over the base graph as the edges in the test partition. None of the recommenders greatly increase the proportion of spreaders in the network. Instead, content-based and random decrease it. Nonetheless, these recommenders achieve both the largest number of recommended spreaders and the largest number of users becoming spreaders for at least one iteration, converting 52% of users. However, as they also favored interactions with novel and faraway users, interactions with spreaders might not have been concentrated in the same neighborhood, reducing their joint influence. Regarding clustering coefficients, significant increments were observed for topology and popularity recommenders, while significant decrements were observed for content and random. This confirms that interaction added by content and random do not contribute to increasing user centrality. Also, for those recommenders, the clustering coefficient for non-spreaders was higher than for spreaders, indicating that non-spreaders had a more central role in the network, while spreaders might not be well connected, although scattered across the whole network. Most recommenders contributed to increase the proportion of users interacting with the spreaders, with popularity accounting for the 95% of users with a spreader in their neighborhood. On the other hand, random greatly decreased the proportion of non-spreaders and increased it for spreaders, inducing network segregation. This is confirmed by the interaction correlation, which showed that popularity and topology increase the correlation for spreaders, meaning that the spreaders are surrounded by other spreaders, and decrease it for non-spreaders, meaning that there were more spreaders in their neighborhood. For non-spreaders, a similar effect is observed for content and random recommenders. Finally, according to random walk controversy, friends of friends increase group segregation, while the other recommenders cause users to mix. While in these terms reducing polarity might seem good, it also implies a higher mixture of user interactions, which might increase spreaders' reachability. When analyzing individual groups, interactions between non-spreaders seem to consolidate. All recommenders increase the likelihood of spreaders interacting and perhaps influencing non-spreaders. Conversely, popularity increases the likelihood of non-spreaders interacting with the spreaders. From this, we have two observations. First, simulations indicate that recommending a large number of spreaders does not directly lead to a high conversion rate. Instead, recommended spreaders also need to be well connected with the neighbors to effective spreading. The number of converted users seem insufficient to characterize spreading dynamics. Generally, recommenders with low diversity novelty strengthen the influence and centrality of the small set of users involved in more paths around the network. However, at the same time, their influence is mainly circumscribed to a small network region and can hardly spread. Second, recommenders diversifying interactions and also fostering connections with users in other network regions seem to have a stronger effect on spreaders' presence and interaction dynamics. In this scenario, network topology and rewiring seem to be the greatest driver for opinion spreading. Then, for those cases fostering interactions with faraway users, it will be interesting to see how spreading evolves under different rewiring conditions and levels of network densification. Up to now, we have presented a preliminary exploration to better understand how user recommenders affect network dynamics in terms of misinformation spreader distribution and influence. Nonetheless, when analyzing results, we need to consider that recommenders are agnostic of the particularities of recommended users. For example, if groups were inverted, recommenders would have fostered a propagation of non-spreaders instead of spreaders. Then recommenders might need to be enriched with information regarding user trustworthiness. Our study brings to attention the potential implications of recommenders, serving as a basis to study other related polarization phenomena. So this leads to our second study of how to help to reduce the effect of echo chambers in the presence of recommenders systems. Yes, Rebecca.
Sorry, I just had a question about before you move on. Would you mind just going back for just a second to make sure that I understood?
Yes.
So if I understood correctly, you do link prediction using each one of these different recommender systems. And then I'm not aware of the Q voter model. So could you maybe explain that just a little bit more? The one that you use to define how someone's opinion changes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have a voter simulation model in which we have a user that is influenced by one of the neighbors. I mean, we get to pick a user at random, then we pick a neighbor of this user, and if they have the different opinion, the opinion of the neighbor prevails. So we change our opinion based on the opinion of our neighbor. In the Q-voter model, we have an additional restriction that is not only one user, one neighbor, but Q neighbors. So we selected Q neighbors of one user, and then we change the opinion accordingly. If all they agree, we change our opinion. And that's how the opinions spread in the model.
So it's not majority votes. It has to be like all of them have to agree in order for
Q vote, see. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Great. How to help to reduce the effect of echo chambers in the presence of recommender systems. Echo chambers refer to situations in which people only interact with others expressing their same point of view, which can lead to selective exposure, bias assimilation, and even more polarization. This phenomenon has arisen as a concern not only in political discourses, but also in the context of conspiracy theories, in which they could lead to a stronger radicalization, seclusion from society, and destructive actions. Recommender systems play an important role as mediators of information propagation. In turn, they are affected by the different forms of lying harms, hindering their ability to achieve accurate predictions. This situation stems from the fundamental concepts and assumptions on which recommenders are based on. The premise of homophily reduces diversity and novelty of the information and the social relationships to which users are exposed, which could amplify biases and reinforce echo chambers. Then it is necessary to harness recommenders with mechanisms that could help mitigate the negative effects of these unwanted phenomena and thus increase the user-perceived quality of recommenders. So what do we propose? We tackle the friend recommendation problem to foster the diversity of recommendations in an echo chamber setting. We rely on the implicit modeling of echo chambers, both existing and new, to prevent users with recommendations from outside such chambers. A fundamental challenge for this problem is how to learn these dynamic user and echo chamber representations based on the social media activity. Here, implicit modeling implies that we don't explicitly discover networks communities, as knowing such a structure introduces constraints such as defining in advance the criteria to find such communities and might also be computationally complex for large graphs. To this end, we presented Fredich, a friend recommender for breaking echo chambers. It takes as input a social network, and for each user, it ranks recommendations according to an estimated relationship strength. Frege couples echo chamber awareness and user representations to balance the relevance, diversity, and novelty of friend recommendations. It is inspired by a graph convolutional network and a deep and wide architecture, in which the deep part can better generalize over the unseen interactions, while the wide part can better learn the implicit characteristics of users, facilitating the training progress. And well, how Frege works? It starts by taking as input a conversational interaction network, the same we built for the other approach. This means that before we don't focus on the topological network follower and followee interactions, but on the content-based interactions derived from the reply to, retweet, and mention relations. In this sense, relations are directed and weighted based on the number of interactions. For example, the times a user mentions another. Additional weight alternatives could be considered based on the number of reactions that conversations receive or even their length. Users are represented by two things. First, a trainable embedding of their intrinsic characteristics, and second, BERT embeddings for the last 15 shared tweets. Tweets were represented by its average pool embeddings, and no fine-tuning was performed. Then, these two representations are concatenated in X. We define 3 parallel graph convolutional networks to learn users' latent characteristics. Each GCN allows learning the specific weight of a particular interaction type regarding the complete set of users' relations. Then, the outputs of the 3 GCNs are concatenated to generate an intermediate user representation based on the combined interactions. We're using GCNs not only to represent the target users, but also the recommendees. GCNs allow representing nodes in a graph based on their characteristics and those of the adjacent ones. For the target users, these include the characteristics of the interactions, while for the potential recommendees, this includes characteristics related to how other users interact with them. The two generated representations are then concatenated and passed through two dense layers. Despite that networks are architecturally the same, they are not Siamese, as weight are not shared between them. Finally, the resulting embeddings of the target user and the potential recommendees are concatenated and passed through a dense layer with one unit. And the output of this layer is added to the output originating the GCNs and the two dense layers. Finally, for each user, Frege ranks the recommendations in ascending order based on the estimated strength. This strength acts as proxies of how likely users are to interact in the future. The higher the strength, the better the balance between user relevance and distances between echo chambers, and the higher the likelihood of users interacting in the future. Even though Frege considers different interactions, it combines them into a unique strength value, which are asymmetric to account for Twitter's asymmetric nature. As you want recommendations to balance diversity and relevance, yes, Rebecca?
Sorry, I have another question. Just about your architecture, if you don't mind. If you would rather, I can ask these questions at the end. Please let me know if that's better.
As you prefer.
Okay. For the word embeddings and the user embeddings, I understood the way that you calculate the word embeddings. So for each user, you look at their last 15 tweets and you pool them together. For the user embeddings, I didn't fully understand how those were calculated.
Which has used trainable embeddings.
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
We initialize it with random values and we allow them to...
okay, gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Those were my questions.
Great. Awesome. We were here. So we need interactions between users in different chambers to carry a higher weight than interactions between users in the same chamber. With this, we also aim at implicitly learning chamber structure, which allows for more freedom in their definition and more sensitivity to network changes. In this sense, we define a loss function based on the distance between users and the number of interactions. The logarithm reduces the influence of users with many interactions, and the scalar prevents an interaction with a weight of 1 to become 0. Beta allows tuning the preference of whether to receive closer and more accurate recommendations or farther and more diverse recommendations. In this case, we set it to 1. User distance is based on cosine similarity computed over a new 10-dimensional embedding. These embeddings were trained separately from the main model. The intuition here is that users with similar interaction patterns will be represented by similar embeddings. Finally, based on word-to-vec, we also apply a negative sampling to help Frege learn that positive instances are strongly related. To evaluate Frege, we define 2 research questions. First, how does Frege compare with other approaches in the literature? And second, how each component contributes to Frege performance. Evaluation was based on the Obamacare collection, including tweets related to the Obamacare and AC hashtags. Estimated user polarity was also included. Using the faking it tool, we collected about 8 million tweets belonging to over 8,000 users. For the purpose of evaluation, we only kept those users in the largest connected component to guarantee that they could be both source and target of interactions. We ended up selecting over 6,000 users. Based on interaction network and the pre-computed polarity, we were able to verify the existence of echo chambers. We quantified the polarization of users in the large connected component, relying on the relation between user leaning and consumption leaning to assess the existence of echo chambers. Green nodes represent Democrats, gray nodes represent Republicans. Here we can see that for each type of interaction, how the Democrats and Republicans interacted. We see that users are grouped based on their leaning, with a few small mixed groups with users having leanings close to zero. Users seem to be more likely to reply to users with the same leaning. Now we see the relation between the political leaning of users and the average information consumption leaning per interaction type. The color represents user density. The lighter the area, the higher the density of users in such area. Marginals show the distribution of user leaning. Positive correlations were found between users' production and consumption leaning. In average, 89% of interactions of Republicans users were with other Republicans. Democrats interacted with users on a wider range of Democrat and neutral leanings. We compare Fredich with 11 different baselines. We considered 4 trivial non-personalized and traditional recommenders. Then we adapted several traditional state-of-the-art item recommenders to the friend recommendation task. And finally, we also considered 2 works implementing re-ranking techniques to foster recommendations diversity and mitigate filter balance. Recommendations were evaluated not only in terms of their accuracy, but also their impact in network shape and evolution. In terms of relevance, we chose 3 classic metrics: precision, recall, and NDCG. For diversity novelty, we chose variations of intra-list dissimilarities that were assessed considering both individual users and their communities. The community perspective allows studying the fairness of recommendations across the structures users form. As before, dissimilarities were computed using the Euclidean distance of either structure or content-based vectors. All evaluations were evaluated over the same data partitions. We considered top 10 recommendations as over half of the users had 10 or more interactions in the test set. And here we have the results. Random recommender achieved low relevance but high diversity and novelty results as expected. Differences were up to 400% in terms of recall. Results also show a trade-off between relevance and diversity novelty, as techniques achieving high relevance also achieve low diversity novelty. Statistically significant differences were observed for all techniques but Fredich and GraphRec. Topological baselines also achieve high precision and low diversity, which is expected as recommendations are purely based on user neighborhood. Fredich achieved significantly better diversity and novelty results. Regarding content, considering the full tweet set achieved the highest diversity novelty results, while only using the last 15 increased the relevance. This could be related to the broad period covered by the dataset in which topics could have shifted. Embedded representation increased the relevance of recommendations, but decreased diversity and novelty. The best results for the adapted item recommendation techniques were achieved by GraphRec. GraphRec even outperformed Fredich for 1 diversity metrics. Nonetheless, most differences favoring Fredich were statistically significant. NDCG showed that despite lower precision and recall, Fredich still ranked high the relevant users. The re-ranking techniques achieve higher relevance than GraphRec and Fredich, but lower diversity and novelty. In this case, the achieved diversity novelty did not significantly improve the characteristics of the original network. In average, Fredich improved baselines up to 47% in terms of diversity novelty. In general, novelty was higher than diversity, implying that even when recommendations included similar users, they were still different from the already known ones, thus expanding users' neighborhood. As a highlight, novelty was higher for the structural distance, implying that recommended users belong to other communities but still share similar content, which is expected given the topic-focused nature of data. Based on these results, we can conclude that Fredich satisfactorily increased the diversity and novelty by recommending users from outside the chamber of influence, thus fostering the openness of users and the chambers. To verify the effectiveness and contribution of each component of Fredich, we performed an ablation study considering different variants which change either the architecture or the data that the model was fed. A new model was trained from scratch for each evaluation, and when corresponding relations were removed from both the training and test sets. Here we have the results. For those models modifying Fredich architecture, relevance was not greatly affected. On the other hand, diversity novelties show more variability. For example, only one of the alternatives had a positive effect on diversity and novelty. In all other cases, for at least one metric, results worse. On the other hand, including content allowed to significantly increase diversity and novelty of recommendations. Differences were higher for the structural analysis, showing that content helped Frederick in searching for recommendations far away from users. While replies accounted for the lowest number of interactions, solely considering them allowed to increase relevance and novelty while decreasing diversity. Conversely, only considering mentions or retweets significantly decreased diversity and novelty. When analyzing pairs of interactions, results did not improve. In this regard, results seem to imply that each interaction type carried different weights in fostering user relations. In summary, results show that each component of Frederick significantly contributed to its performance. Now we have presented Frederick, an echo chamber-aware recommender aiming at making relevant, novel, and diverse friend recommendations. Frederick achieved similar relevant results to baselines while increasing the diversity and novelty, thus effectively helping to reduce the echo chamber effect. We're also able to verify the contribution of each component. Finally, we know that there are misinformation spreaders, and we know that recommenders can be affected by them. So our last question is, how can we identify them? We already know that unreliable content can severely affect society, posing significant threats to democracies and economy, for which in the long term, the trustworthiness of the entire news ecosystem might be at risk. In this context, users play a fundamental role as spreaders of fake content. Then it is essential to detect both fake content and the users spreading it, as it will provide valuable information for the design of strategies to rapidly contain the spreading. So how can we effectively detect fake news spreaders? Approaches in the literature have focused either on content handcrafted or network topology features, disregarding their complementary nature. For example, as fake content is intentionally written to confuse users, it might be misleading. Also, only considering network topology might lead to incomplete and noisy networks. At most, approaches combine content embeddings with handcrafted user tweet and content features. In this sense, our model includes not only features derived from the shared content, but also the content propagation trees and user community interactions. Then, user representation is divided into three components. First, handcrafted features represented by a vector concatenated characteristics such as personality traits, readability scores, lieu categories, sentiment, and emotions. When appropriate, features were standardized. Extreme values were clipped, working as a gradient clipping to help speed up training and reduce noise. Previous works have shown the importance of network topology and interactions to identify both fake news and fake news spreaders. In this sense, user representation includes their social interactions modeled by GCNs, which allows representing nodes based on their characteristics and those of their interactions. In this case, defining three concatenated GCNs allows including interactions from three home neighbors. As a result, user community structures are characterized by considering both the direct and explicit user interactions and the neighborhoods of such interactions. Given the complex nature of information propagation, the definition of discriminant and handcrafted features based on content propagation structure might be complex and biased. For example, features representing summary statistics such as centrality, clicks, or connected components might be too general to express the particularities of content cascades. Then, to capture the semantics of propagation patterns, we represent each shared tweet based on the propagation tree derived from the triggered replies. While the user graph focuses on users' complete set of interactions, these trees are concerned with the specific responses that each tweet originated, regardless of the users who made them. Then, each tweet is represented by its propagation tree, its pooled BERT embeddings, and the pooled BERT embedding of the tweets in the propagation tree. This mechanism is expected to discover relations between tweets that are similar in content or style, but are not explicitly connected. Once the user and tweets representations are obtained, they are concatenated with the original user feature vector and passed through two dense layers to compute the output of the model. The model was trained using a hinge loss function with class weights. Class weights aim to compensate for unbalanced class distribution in training, which could induce a majority class prediction. As a result, the model would prefer to misclassify instances of the minority class instead of moving predictions from the majority class inside the predefined margin. Evaluation was based on FIVID, a COVID-related misinformation dataset collected for Twitter, the same we used for simulating the misinformation spreading process. As before, based on tweet labels, users were deemed as spreaders if the proportion of shared fake content was higher than 0.5. Based on the retrieved tweets, we built both a tweet and user graph. In the tweet graph, nodes represent tweets and edges, the reply, quote, and retweet relations following the information flow. In the user graph, nodes represent users, while edges were derived from the tweet graph and the users mentioned in tweets. Edges were weighted according to the number of interactions between users. Finally, to ensure that the user graph is not connected, we kept users and their tweets belonging to the largest connected component of the user graph that share more than one tweet. We compare our model with several baselines. First, simple baseline consisting of traditional features such as user and tweet stats, readability, personality, and globe, BERT, and node-to-vec embeddings. Second, several state-of-the-art techniques mainly based on handcrafted features and the shared content combined with deep learning models. Performance was evaluated based on binary and weighted precision and recall and the AUC score. Evaluation was performed in an offline setting based on a temporal user split in which users were sorted according to the date of the first interaction. All evaluations were performed over the same data partitions. Here we have the results for both simple and state-of-the-art baselines. User and tweet statistics achieve better results than alternatives based on content, implying that tweet statistics might be more helpful in identifying fake news spreaders than the actually shared content. Embedding content representations achieve similar results to the handcrafted features. This situation seems to confirm that fake content tends to show similar characteristics and style to authentic content. Similarly, the low results observed for the embedding representation could be related to the topically focused nature of data, in which fake and authentic content will be naturally related, and differences between them might be too subtle for the base to detect. On the other hand, network topology, as characterized by node-to-vec, improved content-based representations, showing that despite being sparse, topology can be a strong indicator of fake news spreaders. State-of-the-art baselines show similar precision to the simple baselines, but lower recall. The best precision recall balance was observed on Sansonetti, confirming the tendency of tweet and users' stats to provide relevant information for spreader detection. On the other hand, the worst results were achieved by FactTweet, which rely on characterizing users by dividing their timeline into small tweet chunks. In this case, it might be possible that chunks do not convey enough information to adequately characterize users. Our model achieved the highest results. Although some baselines achieve similar precision results to our model, they achieve lower recall. In this sense, results confirm the importance of combining the different information sources for spreader detection. The differences in binary and weighted precision recall are higher for the baselines than for our model. This could imply that the non-spreader class has a more significant impact on metrics for the baseline than for our model. Our model also outperformed all baselines in terms of the Matthews coefficient, with differences of up to 1 order of magnitude. Finally, we also evaluated performance in a tenfold stratified cross-validation scenario. For most baselines, results also show similar tendencies than for the temporal data split. In summary, this work represented a model for identifying fake news spreaders in social media. The preliminary evaluation showed the model's potential for accurately detecting fake news spreaders and the importance of combining the different aspects of user representation to achieve a more effective characterization of spreaders. And a quick ethical disclaimer. In all cases, research was based on publicly available Twitter data, originally collected and tagged by third parties. No user personal information was included in analysis, and no user identity is being disclosed. As per Twitter terms of service, the shared data only includes user and tweet IDs and aggregated content features. The presented work aims to provide users with tools to identify and quantify unwanted phenomena, and in the long term to help users increase their decision awareness. Results of these studies should not be used to publicly criticize any users regardless of their behavior. Finally, the studies can suffer from bias from the data collection and tagging process. So, a quick recap. What have we done? First, we presented a preliminary exploration to better understand how user recommenders affect network dynamics in terms of misinformation spreader distribution and influence. We saw that simulations could help evaluate potential scenarios to test new or modified recommenders and assess their effects over deployment. Second, we developed FREDICH, coupling echo chamber awareness and user representations to balance the relevance, diversity, and novelty of friend recommendations. FREDICH produces similarly relevant recommendations to those of the selected baselines while increasing their diversity and novelty, and thus helping reduce the echo chamber effect. Third, we presented a model for identifying fake news spreaders in social media by combining content and user features. the induced propagation trees, and features learned from user interactions. A preliminary evaluation showed the model's potential for accurately detecting fake news spreaders and the importance of combining the different aspects of user representation to achieve a more effective characterization of spreaders. In all cases, data and implementations are publicly available in GitHub. What do we want for the future? Of course, that in all cases, more evaluation with our datasets are needed. In the case of misinformation spreading, we want to perform more extensive evaluation with ad recommenders and opinion propagation models, and better explore user follow and unfollow dynamics and densification scenarios. Regarding the echo chamber aware recommender, we want to continue to explore the particularities of each interaction type and how they contribute to recommendations, and if possible, perform a qualitative study. Finally, regarding the spreader profiling, we want to better explore user relations and tweet temporal sequence and perform an evaluation study. So thanks for your attention. If you're interested in reading a little bit more of any works I introduced, you can find them by following the QR to my website. Well, of course, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. That was super informative. I open the floor to other people, and then I will follow up with my questions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask?
Hello. Hi. Thanks for the talk. That was a lot of